the Big Fat Gay Podcast, where we like to talk about the things that are weighing on our minds. My name is Don Marshall. I'm a big chubby guy, and today I am your Homer. I am your storyteller on your journey to a beautiful story of the future.
How poetic.
That's incredible. I feel like I'm right there on the Argus. My name is Dan Oliverio, public speaker, chubby chaser, author, and yes, it's going to be a day of salty sea stories.
Oh, salty. Okay.
Why salty, Dan?
Well, we're all seamen, that's why.
Oh,
Jesus Christ.
Oh,
You asked.
I'm Trevor Keyson. I'm a super chub, and I'm a pie boy today.
Yes, you are.
I've moved on from cookies. I'm on to pie.
It's been a good month.
Yeah.
Well,
month for us.
food-wise.
Food-wise, good month.
Big qualifier.
Do you want to remind people that you're taking this baking course?
Yes, I'm taking an online baking course. It's 3 milk bars. So yesterday I made their signature milk bar pie, which is like kind of a chess pie with an oatmeal cookie crust. It's wonderful.
Made it better than they do, I will say.
I have to say, I was like, this is better than what I've had.
It is.
Them.
Yeah.
Like they're a little inconsistent.
Yeah.
And you just nailed like the absolute perfect like texture, taste, all of it.
That's my boy.
It is so good. My name is Michael. I am a chaser, and today I am a procrastinating homework boy. I was trying to think of what I was going to bring to the show as we are doing a second Storytime episode, trying to keep things a little lighter and more casual today because it's been a pretty rough week for everybody, especially Trevor and Dan. And it took me a while, but everybody else helped me come up, or I didn't come up with the idea at all. Trevor did, but it's good. And I can't wait to get to it. So before we do, we have some stuff. Should we qualify this and say that we're recording this?
Yeah.
Before,
So just with our recording schedule, this is a couple days after last week's episode
was recorded.
Yeah. So the situation with Neff and everything is like still ongoing.
Yeah.
There's been a little healing, but there's still stuff more forthcoming.
Yeah.
We're still dealing with it, which is why we're taking an easy breezy fun episode. And I think part of that of fun is you sending us Valentine's mail.
Yes.
Those are always extra fun episodes.
Oh, I love reading those.
Your questions, your concerns, your quandaries.
Yes.
Your erotic photos.
Yes.
Calm down.
Your success stories.
People still want us, I think, to top, I'm just going to say it, top fold fucking from
the first Valentine's episode.
Does it get
from
better than full
2020.
fucking?
I feel like that's when the show really started to come into its own.
Yes.
No pun intended.
So if you have any sexual thoughts you'd like to share.
Yeah. More family listening, everyone should hear me say the most obscene things.
Yes.
And maybe sometimes they'll be in the Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru. And they are. That was a thing.
Wait, there's not supposed to be a hole in the jelly donut. There's not supposed to be a hole in the jelly donut. Well, now it's a Boston cream.
Family members, Don. Jesus.
We're keeping it. I think the whole vibe is this is a sweet and salty episode. So keeping on, we're still on track with
sweet
right now.
That's right. So big news from the world of candy. I need a telegraph sound. News.
Breaking news of the world.
News on the march. M&M's has announced that they are redesigning their characters for very important and socially significant reasons.
Absolutely.
They are basically removing all of the defining attributes of each one.
Or lessening.
So, I mean, I have strong feelings about that. Like, M&M's aren't a great candy, so like I don't have a lot of skin in this game. But I was personally offended that they're trying to make Ms. Brown and Miss Green, who they are just, I guess, green and brown.
Yep.
Because they're removing gender markers from the M&Ms.
Oh.
But they're not letting them be sexy, which like they always kind of had this like, will they or won't they? they both had kind of like heels, go-go
But
boots.
I gotta say that unless you were a chubby chaser, the male M&Ms did not have that sexy allure.
no.
No, yeah, true.
Unless you're us.
You're,
Well, and
you maybe
naturally, the fat M&M was the slow one.
Of course.
Well, and the reason I felt the need to include this is part of this rebrand, and they're working towards like more inclusion of like, I guess there's going to be new M&M characters and M&Ms with different body types.
Which how so
Well,
there
actually, no. There are different shapes to
But
the
okay,
M&Ms
there are
now.
two.
There
There
are.
are two
No,
shapes.
no, there are three.
Are
There's
there?
three. There's the nut encased
Yes, there's a
M&M,
nut.
so the almond and peanut. There's plain, but then the like the peanut butter and the crisped rice ones, they're just more sort of fat around the middle rather than the elongated large.
But the characters.
are they the
Oh, I'm
whoopsie
talking about
fats
the
of the
candy.
M&M world?
I'm talking about the candy. Sorry.
No, they're talking about the character. Like, and I was confused by this, and then I saw like the promotional video for this, and they showed an M&M. It was a peanut M&M on its side, so it was like extra wide looking.
Oh.
That's what the peanut butter and the hazelnut
Can I just
chocolate ones look like.
I just want to bring up two sort of associated pieces of news. Number one is that it has been said that this is being done to distract from the fact that
Yes.
M&M Mars is being sued for child labor practices. But to be
And
fair,
it worked. I didn't know that until just now.
But to be fair, the entire chocolate industry is being sued for child labor practices because this is a very common thing.
Come on, chocolate industry isn't just child labor; they're also slavery.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a whole thing about that. But I think the real news here is that Tucker Carlson is very upset because now the female M&Ms have become unfuckable for him.
Yeah, you don't even want to have a drink with them anymore, is what he said.
I'm sorry. Wait.
He's upset.
Yes, he's
upset
not
that
exaggerating.
the female M&Ms are now. He
And-
didn't say unfuckable. He's like, I wouldn't
not
even
sexy.
want to have a drink with them.
An anthropomorphic candy
yeah.
is
Okay,
not
We're
attractive to him.
talking about
But Ian,
Carlson.
I'm not defending Tucker Carlson, but I'm defending the idea that like M&M sexualized these characters to a degree where like the green M&M was in a swimsuit issue, I think of Sports Illustrated, or it was like an ad mocking the sport, the whole concept, where the green M&M was like peeling off her shell in a sexy way.
yeah.
And there's
That's
also
horrifying. Isn't her shell her skin?
there's also an ad.
Did we learn nothing from Rebel
Or is
Wilson
the
and Cats?
chocolate, is the candy the clothes and the chocolate's the
I
skin?
think it's one of these things of mutable cartoon logic. Like in one cartoon it's this, and another cartoon it's
The
that.
candy shell is the result of a process called enrobing,
Okay.
so it's clothing.
So she's disenrobing.
Maybe the color is the clothing and
good
the
lord.
actual candy material is the skin. Anyway.
There was also an ad at some point where it was all of the M&Ms with their flesh peeled off, like draping their candy shells
candies.
over their shoulder and stuff.
I think I think based on the idea of enrobing, they are trying to get the candy coating is their clothing.
Yeah.
But it only fits one way. Anyways, it's skin tight.
I don't know. I look forward to the fat M&M characters and how they will probably problematically
Yeah.
be portrayed. Because like I don't know, there's a whole thing with M&Ms eating M&Ms, like eating the candies, but then there was also like
That was one of the first jokes. Yeah.
But there was another ad more recently where it was like they're introducing a new M&M character and it pans over and just like arms and legs are on the ground and the other M&Ms have chocolate all over their faces.
Yeah. It was really disturbing.
Yeah, I feel like when you start to take your fictionalized anthropomorphic candy world too seriously, it's when things like that don't land anymore. Like, okay, they're eating their own now, and we're now considering this cannibalism because you've given them all personalities. Like, this is weird. This is uncomfortable. Do M&Ms eat chocolate?
Well, it's just it's best not to ask
That's how they get the
questions.
chocolate in them.
Yeah,
But
It's like when-
they raise those questions by putting it in the ad.
It's like when you like really start to analyze cars and how like there is a car pope who
Right.
also is in a Pope mobile with bulletproof glass, which implies that in the Cars universe, someone tried to assassinate a car pope.
I think we just drowned in our deep dive here.
Yes.
Fun trivia bit though. The peanut M&M is voiced by J.K. Simmons.
Who I got to, I worked on a commercial that he was in, on a farmer's commercial. He's a super cool guy.
Nice.
Super cool guy.
Wow.
He signed my copy of Whiplash for me. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we've got our eye on you, M&Ms, because this is.
You are accountable.
I don't know. Let's hope we don't have to mobilize against M&M's possibly problematic fat M&M character.
Well, we'll see what happens. I don't have answers.
Now I'm picturing a fat M&M where it's literally an M&M that contains the insides of every other type of M&M they make.
Because he ate them all.
I would try it.
That's the turducken of the candy universe.
It is.
Well, we've
See, now I'm picturing the commercial though, where they're actually taking the poor M&M characters and physically shoving them inside each other.
Oh, that's a particular kind of porn.
M&M human centipede.
oh my God.
Okay, well let's move on. We're going from sweet to salty, because the ocean is salty.
Yeah.
And
Like-
we have a story from Washington Post about so it's from a series I think they're doing called The Regeneration of Travel, and it's highlighting a plus size diver who is diving in Florida's coral reefs.
Jeff Jenkins.
Yes,
That looks like so much fun. The article's really great because the pictures are beautiful. They also have enormous photo spreads of him kayaking. I want to go kayaking where he was kayaking. I'm like desperate to go kayaking where it looks so beautiful.
Yeah.
And Jeff kind of documents his travel as a fat person on Instagram as the Chubby Diaries.
And he has a blog as well.
Yes.
Tens of thousands of followers on TikTok and presumably elsewhere. And it's one of those success stories of like, you know, going from a place of like, oh, I'm only going to be able to achieve this kind of travel and this kind of adventure if I lose weight first, because then that you just, you know, you're to a certain degree, it's true where the world only allows certain size people to do certain things. But then to another degree, that becomes the mindset when it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And so we kind of unraveled that and started just doing things now instead of waiting.
And that spoke to me very directly, especially because I mentioned the kayaking pictures. I love to kayak, but I've gained about 40 or 50 pounds since the last time I went. And it's just, I realized looking at those pictures, it just exists in my head that I haven't gone again because I assume I can't find a kayak that's going to carry me now. Right. And I'm watching someone about my size kayaking, and I'm realizing that is my own damn excuse.
Well, and you were meant to be on the water. Your whole heritage is
genetically designed to be kayaking.
Hawaiian and Norwegian.
I'm basically like a Portuguese water dog living in the desert. Like I need water.
I mean, it's right over there, Don.
It's 45 minutes away. 30 minutes of parking and then $70 to rent the kayak.
Yeah, that's a very Los Angeles beach problem.
That's right. We are, in fact, a coastal city. It just doesn't always feel like it.
No, it doesn't.
But Jeff has been inspiring people across the world, and I think it's just very, very cool to see. I was curious, this is maybe just ignorance on my part, but so he's a diver, right? Or that's at least one of the things that he does. How, like, logistically speaking, how do you do that? Like, how do you sink enough?
Weights.
Yeah,
weights. Okay.
That's how.
And do you?
That's how everyone.
That's
does.
everybody thinks.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. And you just leave them behind? How do you? I've never done it before.
No.
You're literally balancing your buoyancy so that you're reaching sort of a zero buoyancy state.
Okay.
So that you'll stay wherever you kind of move.
Okay. So you
yourself
can
to.
go up without. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, but you will have to push yourself up, unlike floating yourself up.
So, Michael, what we're going to do is we're going to get some cement in a little tub, and we're just going to put the cement in the tub and put your feet in there.
Okay.
And then just drop you in the ocean.
You know, like that time we made galoshes.
Right. Okay.
And you're gonna
And then I'll be able to dive?
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
We'll figure out getting you back up later. But that's
That is one of the most horrifying, like, I can't remember. We talked about this at some point recently. The idea of like, you're sinking into the ocean, and at some point, like, at what point do you just give up? Like, I'm too far away from the surface. I'll just give up. I'm floating down. I think it was when we were talking. It was when I was at your place, Trevor and Dan's place on Saturday. Like, after all of this NAFA stuff was going wild, and I was just like, at what point do you just like, just
I think because I was at some point I described just wanting to walk into the ocean.
yeah.
But see, I would float.
You would.
I would
float.
either get taken away by like seals to join them or eaten by a shark.
Ooh, I'm going to tell a story about that later. Not sharks.
I'm sorry. Well, that's quite a tease. We'll get to it eventually.
All right.
Oh,
We have Fat Watch.
this is it. All right.
Oh boy, I'm excited. Yes.
Back once again, soaring into the clouds.
Just makes me happy.
It's Fat Watch 2022. An eagle landed on my glove.
Yeah, so this came across my field of notice. More basically medical malpractice in the fat world. As many fat people know, one of the common diagnoses that you can get from your doctor is you're fat. Stop it. If you have a hangover, it's because you're fat. If your knees hurt, it's because you're fat. If you have a rash, it's because you're fat. If you have problems breathing, it's because you're fat. And so that's what they told this guy. Well, you're fat. That's why you have this rash, and that's why you have these aches and pains. Well, because you're fat.
Mm-hmm.
And he was misdiagnosed. What he had was Lyme disease.
Yeah.
And
Which untreated can be deadly.
can be very deadly. But he would have died of obesity. We know that in the statistics.
Right.
So the takeaway I have from this is just to not accept that, or to not buy into the, well, yeah, I am fat, I guess that must be why. And usually the key way to get around that is, if I weren't fat, how would you be treating this?
And specifically, the story that we're talking about in The Insider is about the doctor who saved him.
Yes.
The doctor who caught the fact that his symptoms were getting worse despite all of these other quote unquote treatments that were.
You mean weight
useless.
loss?
Yeah. Or like, just put a topical application on the rash. That'll fix it, but it's not fixing it. And he, so
And again, the idea that the medicine isn't working because, again, it's your fault you're fat.
I'm going to attempt his name, Dr. Mikhail Varshavsky, better known as Dr. Mike on social media, not only diagnosed the patient correctly and saved his life, but then goes on to talk about the over prevalence of fat bias in medical
Circles?
Yeah, basically just the over prevalence. And they have some statistics in here, which I guess they make sense from a like, oh, I believe that, but it's also I'm going to get the numbers right. 77% have inherent bias or implicit weight bias is what I'm saying. 74% got the number wrong. And then 67 had explicit weight bias, where it was like, oh yeah, no, I get it. I get that I'm blaming the fat for this, and that's that. And that's the truth.
There was a Canadian study done of family physicians, and in the Canadian study, they found that 34% of physicians would have a problem having a fat friend. If that's not implicit bias, what is?
Yeah. But the upside here is that Dr. Mike has specifically contributed to this article by saying, this is wrong, this is real, and here's an example of how we were able to correct for this, and we need to continue to do
I
that.
remember hearing stories like this all the way back to like the 90s.
Of course.
80s. And the problem is, every time it happens in the medical establishment, they look at it and they just treat it as though it's a one-off, right? Oh, it's just a freak event that occurred. And it's, meanwhile, the entire fat world is sitting there looking at them going like, it's not a one-off. Oh, if there is only some way we could approach these one-offs. It's not a one-off. Oh, these one-offs.
And there's so many one-offs done, they have a name for it. It's called the obesity paradox.
Yeah.
Because it's a paradox that it doesn't always kill people 100% of the time.
That almost feels like an excuse, like if something's a paradox, it's unfixable. So like, okay, well, that's just a paradox,
It's this dumpster category of stuff that doesn't fit with our paradigm. And the paradigm can't be wrong because, well, it's about fat. And we know we're right about fat. So we're just going to dump these one-offs, as you've said, these, millions of one-offs.
Millions and millions of one-offs.
Into the garbage category because they don't fit the data.
But his advice, which I suppose is a little obvious, but also very hard to implement, probably for most people, is simply to confront your doctor if you feel that they're overemphasizing your weight. Or attempt to find another provider, which is easier said than done. But he says, this is your right as a patient. The relationship between a provider and a patient has to be strong in order for proper health outcomes to occur. And I think, so what I recommend is that when you confront your doctor about this, if they give you any pushback, you just say, Dr. Mike told me so. And this is,
Yeah, that's going to get you so nowhere. No, I think there's two things. One is, how would you treat this how would you, the first question is, well, do thin people have this problem? Yes. Well, how would you treat a thin person who had this problem? Mm-hmm. And then the other thing to look at is if you have this discussion with your doctor and he says, well, yeah, but you say, I'd like you to treat this as if I were thin. They say, yeah, but you're not thin. And you say, well, what would you prescribe? And they tell you, and you can confront them by saying, I want you to put it in your chart that you refused to give me this treatment. I want that documented. And that is usually enough.
That's great.
That is usually enough to scare them into, okay, well, I guess we could try the treatment.
That's fantastic. I love that.
So it gives you some kind of, in theory, gives you some kind of legal like malpractice recourse if
fine, we will take it your route and your method of treatment. But if you are wrong, you are going to give me everything you own.
Well, because I mean, doctors are primarily in the business of helping people, but they're terrified of lawsuits. They're far more terrified of lawsuits than a fat patient dying.
I'm making that little, I'm rubbing my thumb against my fingers.
Oh yeah,
and I'm talking about money.
Yeah, the moolah
Cheddar.
sign.
So now that I'm pissed off of the entire medical establishment, let's move on to story time.
Yeah, we're back to sweet. We're back to, we did some
Sweet, and then
a little more
salty,
sweet, and then salty,
and then
and a
salty.
little salty, and now we're getting back to sweet. There's layers.
I'm hoping
still
we can find some story time like tinkly playroom music to play here.
No, I want a sea chant. I want a sea shanty. Since you
TikTok,
that we're all Argonauts, and you were Homer.
Well, there was like sea shanty TikTok for a while where it was like just like
Oh, that's
people-
right.
I never watched any of them, and then I heard one on the Colbert Report. It was really good.
It was, but it was
Colbert Show.
it was during like a weird part of the start of the pandemic where
Yeah.
there was a lot going. It was like kind of, I feel like during the where everyone was really into sourdough.
Yeah.
Oh my god!
Have you checked on your sourdough, listener?
Go feed the starter.
You probably haven't since 2020.
Yeah. But yeah, who's gonna start us off for story time?
I think you have a short, sweet little
I have a nice
bundleable
little
story.
sweet.
All right.
So I had an experience once upon a time with a chaser, and he was sweet, but we had talked, we hung out, things were getting frisky, and we just had this weird thing where it was like we were operating on different frequencies, and just every like physical interaction was just like slightly off. It was like almost like maybe if you went on vacation, people came in and like made everything in your house like a quarter inch. Like if they moved it over, it made it smaller. It was just like, this is just like frustrating and like it's not working. And he really wanted me at one point to like get on top of him. He wanted to feel my weight on top of him. And I don't know, Don, if you've had that where it's like guys want to feel of your weight, and if you've done it. I am always kind of hesitant because like I'm afraid of killing someone.
Yeah.
I have
We're made of sterner stuff, we chasers.
there are people in this room who I may or may not have like bruised ribs of.
Oh please.
Enjoy.
No, I mean, he literally means, oh, please.
But it was this thing where like we got in some positions, and after that experience, like he completely, like the energy was different. It was almost like we synchronized and like came, maybe like we adjusted our time traveling wristwatches or something, and like came.
It's almost
back into
like
the
you
same
pushed
plane.
him back in his body.
Yeah, like Dr. Strange.
I feel like that's a scenario where, or at least I've run into this before, where it's the longer, if you ever spend time dancing around something that you actually really, really want and are afraid to ask for, you're always going to be slightly distracted by the fact that what you're doing is not that. And so if you can just kind of like take that leap, ask for it, figure it out, make it happen. There's a certain amount of like, it takes faith to ask for that. If you feel like you don't want to get dropped, and that the other person meets you there, you've established trust, and now you can do all kinds of fun things together because you're on the same wavelength.
Yes, but there's more.
Yes.
Oh,
So around this time, Dan and I had watched on HBO. What was it? Was it just
I
called
think it's
Temple
called.
Grandin?
I think it's called Temple Grandin.
Temple Grandin about
sure.
animal behavioral psychologists
With autism.
Yeah,
Yes.
and she has autism, so she has a unique view into animals' worlds.
Yes,
Interesting.
and part of that movie is she grew up, I believe, on a dairy farm, or I don't know if it was dairy
ranch
or
of some sort,
a ranch of some sort. And there is this thing where this kind of compression chamber
Squeeze
where
box.
the squeeze box where they place the cows to kind of like, I think, are they brand? I don't know. They're doing stuff for the
No, they're
cows.
calming them down for like injections and
Yes.
things like that.
Okay.
And the cows are, kind of fighting as they're being herded into the squeeze box. But once it compresses them, they calm down. And then in the movie, you see Temple Grandin actually, I think, get into it at one point, and then also construct her own squeeze box, which is like then a thing. Like her roommate reports her because it's like, oh, this weird perverted device.
Yeah, the roommate thinks it's a sex device or whatever. But no, she uses the squeeze box as basically an anti-anxiety technique.
Yeah.
And it's very effective for her. She learned it from the cattle.
Actually, a pretty common technique now for a lot of people with these weighted blankets.
Yes,
they sell.
Exactly right. And so, well, you finish.
Yeah. So I just kind of noticed the change and shift in like how we were able to interact, just how he was more at peace. And I said this to him, and I kind of described the movie to him, and that whole like little arc in the movie. And he's like, huh. He's like, that's interesting. And then there were subsequent times where we got together, and it was still at the start, the same thing of just like and then, but it's like, if I was able to, like the second time it happened, I was like, I think maybe like you should get a weighted blanket or something. Like there's blankets that are weighted to kind of recreate that sensation of compression as like a calming thing. And that was just something that I think it was like a learning experience, but also just very interesting to see, because I knew that was always like a thing where like there's the whole squashing thing. But like I had never seen this act as possibly therapeutic, other than like, I mean, I think sex is therapeutic, but like that this specific act could provide that kind of relief to someone, and also just kind of like as an act of like resynchronization between two people.
Yeah, which I think is really beautiful.
It's really interesting because I have had that similar experience, not with that specific setup,
Yeah.
but with somebody who, when I met them first, they had huge anxiety, and it was very clear they were anxious and very nervous. And then at one point, I forget why, we exchanged a hug, right? And when they wrapped their arms around me, I could actually feel tension go out of them.
Oh yeah. Well, I think we talked
you know.
about that in our whole like experience of like the hugging a chaser, and you just
Hear it
feel
over and
that,
over and over again from
that,
Chase.
like
Yeah.
melt.
Yeah.
To the extent that, if I can piggyback on this, when I have led seminars at BBW events, at BBW bashes, I had a couple of women come up to me and said, so we have a question. And they said, do you think there is a higher incidence of autism in the in the chaser and FA communities? Because for them, it sort of explained a lot of the conversations they've had with chasers. It explained the physicality that chasers often have. And I said, wow, I never thought of that. But then I started hearing stories like Trevor's, like Don's, and I thought, maybe there's something to
like
this.
neurodivergences in general.
Yeah, that maybe there is, I don't want to say I don't think it's causative, but there could be, there is maybe is a higher incidence of autism in the chaser
I don't
community.
think it's universal by any stretch of the imagination, but going off of my own dating pool, I would say that there is a higher than average number for me, but I've worked very closely to computer industry stuff. So
You just might
there's a
have that
higher
population.
incidence of that in that industry. So
I think also I think there is just more diagnosis of different neurodivergence, and just something that is more of a conversation that is happening in the public now.
Yeah.
So I think it's like able to place things about people. Like
that this could be a lot of guys, not just chasers.
I think just a lot of people. And I think that we're seeing more like celebrities coming forward with, diagnosis of different neurodivergences. I feel like a lot, there's been several comedians who've come forward saying like they've received diagnoses of autism, and just kind of like the surprise of that. And then also people in their circles being like, oh, this kind of makes sense. And like, this contextualizes so much of our relationships. And I think it's just, I don't know. I think it's important that these conversations are happening more publicly, because I can also see like, even 20 years ago, a celebrity would never come forward saying, oh, I was diagnosed with autism, or, oh, I was diagnosed with Asperger's, or, whatever.
Well, and I wonder how much of the, a lot of chubs report that chasers can get handsy or touch inappropriately. And again, I wonder if this is not so much, I mean, I don't mean to excuse it, but is this traceable to a sort of neurodivergence, which is more about tactile and touch?
It's that it's not
or not restrained.
Or that it's not an assault, but a miscommunication and a miss.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the way to put it. Yes. Thank you.
That's exactly where I go with it. Cause I've come across this many times in my life with myself, but also with other people that I've come to understand so much better, again, myself and other people, by understanding how their brain works. Because we have this weird sense, or at least I did, and I think it's probably a common experience when you're growing up, like, oh, there is a correct way that people operate, and then there's us trying to be that correct.
There's my way.
Yeah.
And like you try, and it becomes this whole masking thing, and I have a whole blah, 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 blah. But the point is, a lot of hurt and miscommunication and frustration and anger and upset and indignance can come from two people in the same situation wanting the same thing, but going about it completely differently in a way that can be offensive to one person or the other, purely because, for instance, like what Trevor just said, like maybe somebody's method of communication has a lot less to do with, things like eye contact, for instance, which is harder for people with autism. And
so it feels very objectifying perhaps to someone on the other end of that, because they're not getting the eye contact that they would expect, but they're getting felt up.
Yeah, because you're trying to get to the same level of intimacy in completely different ways.
Yeah.
So I think that's
I hadn't thought about
fascinating. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's just, I like, even outside of any kind of neurodivergence is such a common thing of just like miscommunications about how to approach communication.
And I do want to put in here, I am not using this as an excuse for a lot of bad behavior for chasers.
Yeah.
I can think of a lot of chasers that I know are not neurodivergent and they just behave badly.
Well, and my thing has and will always be is given the work that I've been doing on myself, is that once you have an awareness, even a tiny bit of awareness about any of this stuff within yourself, it is incumbent on you to operate in a way that accounts for how other people think and interact. And so like you can't just say, well, it's just me, take it or leave it. I'm going to do this and be this.
I gotta be me.
Yeah. And I'm going to grope up all the chubby guys I can get, because that's the way I communicate. Like that is not excusable.
It's
whatsoever.
not responsible. It's not responsible.
You can't just write off your behavior, good or bad, purely because, well, it's just me. You have to account for other people.
Well, I think a good way to do that is just, if it's something you're aware of, communicating it, which I think I see a lot of, and I think is good, because like on Bigger City, I've seen, chubs and chasers state, or, like whatever neurodivergence, and like just straight up, like usually like I've seen that like first thing in the profile. And I think it gives context to any kind of miscommunication that may occur, or just like difference in style.
Absolutely. Is it my turn?
Yeah, sure.
I think so.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to try and set this up right. And I'm probably going to need Dan's help, because he's the other half of this conversation. So in my 10 years living in LA, 10 and a half years, I've moved, I would say, between 8 and 9 times. Sort of, there was an in-between move in there once where I moved out of my old place, and while I was looking for another place, I put everything in storage, and I was living with Trevor and Dan for about a month, right? It's like 4 or 5 weeks. And in that time, what was it? Your nickname for me was the Phantom Guest, I think, or Phantom Roommate.
I think the Phantom Roommate.
Because I think I was just always out. I was either out doing stuff all the time, or I guess I walk quietly, which maybe is just a function of having lived in apartments most of my life.
It was a nightmare.
Frankly, my respect for your privacy and solitude was
excruciating.
Exactly. So there was one time where I said, maybe I'm not inflicting myself upon them. Maybe I could actually hang out and it wouldn't be an imposition. And so
we allowed him on the couch and everything.
We all hung out.
Wow. They still won't let me on the couch.
Well, you have to stay with them. That's the trick.
Okay. All right. Got it.
We put a blanket on the couch for Michael, and that was where he was allowed to sit on the couch. And it had his scent, so he knew that's where he was supposed to sit.
And the carpet, the shag carpet on the floor, which is very squishy and comfortable. But there was a point where we were all hanging out, and as tends to happen, although I think we're getting better at it, it was all three of us talking for a while. Then eventually Dan and I kind of went off into our own tangent world, and Trevor was sitting there probably feeling bored. And then I think you turned in.
I was like, okay, I'm done.
Because Trevor doesn't drink also, and Dan and I were having wine, I believe, which is a little unusual for me. And I think that was the first time in my life. I mean, we had talked before a fair amount, but usually just about life in general.
Had you read my book at that point?
Yes.
Yeah.
And
we had that background.
And it had come up a few times, but basically having a non-diagnosis based chaser chat, like there was no problem to solve.
Right.
There was no advice that I was seeking. It was literally just speaking on the same level about life and chaserdom. And
in my experience, chasers never talk to each other except possibly to compare notches on the bedpost. It's just the most rudimentary, like, hey, what about that guy? Oh yeah, what about that guy?
right.
And this was so not that. This was like, how does it feel? What do you think? What was the
Well, and that was the first time, and it's so hard it's so weird to think about now that I've been doing the podcast, which has been a huge amount of self-expression about these things. But prior to that, really none at all, because other people were either the guys I was dating, in which case they really only had the other side of things. They were receiving what I was giving, but it wasn't like they're not intrinsically understanding it necessarily.
phrasing?
Yeah. Yes, Don?
Moving on.
Okay.
All good.
And so to be on the same page about something, to say like, for instance, we discovered that we have a lot in common about just the ways that we'll relate to a guy, the things that we appreciate about somebody, what we might be attracted to.
And then also the way those diverge.
Yeah. And also some very distinct differences. And I'd never had that conversation before. And similarly to how I've experienced going onto neurodivergent TikTok in the last few months and seeing, oh my God, there's so many people out there just like me who have these same experiences of life, which of course I knew that, fundamentally understood that, but seeing people's experiences, hearing about them and saying, this is relatable. Here's the comment section where people agree with that. And I don't feel alone anymore. That was the first time that had happened, was talking with Dan, staying up until like 2 a.m. and drinking and laughing. And I just remember distinctly, there was this huge sense of relief. Maybe this might be too graphic. I don't know if I want to. I'll just
say it. I want it out later.
I don't know.
Say it. You can edit it out. You can take it out yourself if you don't like it.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, I don't tend to do that. Once I say, I try not to edit for my own vanity. I try and only edit for the benefit of the show.
What you mean is you only edit internally, not externally.
Yeah.
Say it.
So basically, there was this one. We were talking about sexual experiences, which I'd never done with another person before that was on my same wavelength.
You're not explaining to another gay guy about being a chubby chaser. Yeah.
Right. And in this moment, I'm really hoping that Julia has left to go to her appointment, because she was in the room right next door. It came up, I think you said it first, and then I was like, oh my God. He was like, yeah, blowjobs do nothing for me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was like, what? I thought I was the only weird, crazy person. I felt like there was something wrong with me for that not being the case, or for that being the case.
Yeah. And just to clarify, dear listener, it's not that we resent giving blowjobs.
No.
It's that like, we don't necessarily want to receive them.
Receiving, or like, I don't mind if you want to do that. I don't mind. It's just not gonna like,
that's not what you're there for.
I need something else going on. Like, and I think partially there's some kind of like ADHD element to it, where like, if that's the only thing going on, if that's the only point of contact, I feel a disconnect. I want more points of
physical contact,
touch, of like interest, of stuff to do. Like I like having multiple things going on. And so like, and if I'm just sort of lying there kind of waiting, I get very uncomfortable feeling like I need to somehow be doing more or
I think that's particularly to you, that you almost feel like they're doing all the work, you should be participating more.
or if this, like, for this to be more enjoyable or exciting, that I would want more access to that other person, like in some way. But anyway, the whole point of that was just to say, like, the sense of relief that I felt going, oh my God, I'm not the only crazy person out there. There's two of us.
Well, and I hear this from chubs all the time, where I'll say, like, and by the way, I'm not going to fuck you. And they're like, and I say, is that a deal breaker? And they're like, no, thank God. like that was, they were kind of wondering how we're going to handle that when it came up. And like, for me to take it off the table is, I mean, admittedly, it's sometimes a deal breaker for people, but from a lot of chubs, it's, oh my God, thank God we don't have to deal with that.
I think we should talk about this at some point, because there is now more people identifying with this, with like, they don't like penetrative sex or they don't like oral sex. And then but they're like, it's the gay community. So like, I have to say top or bottom or verse.
Yeah,
but now people now identifying as, like, I think they're calling it either side or sides. And I think we should, I mean, I've read a few things about it. I think we should talk about that at some point.
maybe,
and I don't know, maybe
Because it intersects
Valentine's.
with kink, it intersects with a lot of things.
If you are either identify as is it side or sides?
I don't know what that means. What is that?
I've heard it referred to as side or sideways.
Okay. I don't know if you identify as side
top,
or sideways.
bottom, sideways, verse. So top means topping, bottom means bottoming, verse means either, sideways means neither.
Oh.
Which is something that I didn't say side at the time, but I will usually say, are those my only choices? or that binary distinction doesn't really apply to me.
Yeah.
Rate us about that. Share your feelings or questions about sideways, side, position identity.
Yeah. I think that could be a good new territory for us as far as the next Valentine's episode.
Yeah.
Anyway, the whole point of bringing that up was just that feeling of intense relief,
That you're not the only one.
Yeah, just you can understand that, but understanding is not the same as feeling. Like feeling it, having an actual experience, and it only happened because I sat down with another chaser and just talked. It would not have happened any other way.
And chasers, if you're out there trying to think like, God, that sounds great, I wonder if I could have that kind of conversation. I think the way into that is that it's a conversation that's more about you than about what you're attracted to or your conquests. It's really about you and how you feel, how you're wired, your experience from your point of view, rather than that guy over there.
Right.
It involves a lot of thinking about yourself, introspection, and then listening to the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. Introspection is not being a very introspective person without trying, it always shocks me when other people aren't. And that's one of those miscommunication things where I have to understand that other people don't necessarily do that. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily come naturally to other people.
I mean, everyone's not laying awake at night thinking about something they said to someone in the 4th grade and how that has rippled throughout their life.
No, dude, I never go back farther than the 5th grade. You're weird. You are weird.
Crazy person. So we have some more sweet and salty stories for you coming up. Obviously, this is quite a bit longer than a normal episode, so we're going to break it into 2. So join us next week for part 2 of Storytime, and buckle up. There's a lot coming down the pike.
It's filthy.